So the recording is running right now.
Great. Hello, guys. Thank you for hosting this hackathon. So thank you, Faircom. Thank you, WeChange, for inviting the advice. Today, you invited me remotely to talk about BBB Button. So we'll be talking first about re-advice, more generally, then more specifically about myself, my background. We'll see the projects that we're using BBB Button and the industries that are using it. We'll also talk about the companies offering the commercial support. How did they get it? We'll also go see the roadmap of the next version 2.3. Then we'll generally talk, or we'll go in detail and talk about the contribution, how to write a feature, and the considerations to take when deploying BBB Button in production. So let's first talk about re-advice. So re-advice was created in 2013. It is an IT service or a software engineering company based in Tunisia. We worked so far with more than 30 customers from 30 or more countries around the world. We are mainly working with the MEA, Middle East, and Europe. So this is where most of our customers are based. We also have some customers in Asia, like Korea, and a few other customers in the American continent. So re-advice was established as a software engineering company, but it was created for a BBB Button project when it happened. Our main activity is providing BBB Button services. What does that mean? We provide hosting, we provide full hosting packages, we provide technical help, we provide tools around BBB Buttons, deployment solutions. We also do software engineering, so we have our own. As example, we have our own load balancer. We have some other piece of software we are developing internally. We provide IT consulting internally, and we also do project management. Our latest big project was in Saudi Arabia. It was 1 year length, the project. So I just left the project starting to being sold. And I hope it was successful for them. The projects we worked on for BBB Button. So we started our business initially for a custom build of BBB Button when it was using the old Flash client. We also done some integration on private labeled VoIP servers. So we switched from FreeSwitch to some other proprietary VoIP servers. We worked on private LMSs for it was for a big Danish institution, and we have seen BBB Button being used in lots of industries. So telecommunications, medical centers, education in all its differentiation, so university, schools, training centers, and so on. And we had also a new customer using BBB Button for a call center. So it is for meeting with doctors. So it's really amazing how how BigButton is being used now. So in small numbers, Readvice is now managing around 200 servers.
Wow.
Yes, thank you. Yeah, so COVID helped us a lot. And I think 170 of them are BigButton servers. And since December 2019 to July 2020, we run 370,000 BigButton meetings on our hosting and on the servers we are managing for the customers.
Wow.
Yeah, so the other commercial providers, I think they have bigger numbers, but for us, it's very encouraging. So let's talk a bit about my background. So honestly, it's a bit embarrassing. So I will be doing this only once, I think. So you'll never do it in the coming presentations. But I think it's good to present myself properly at least once. Yes. So because I landed into the BigButton project, but it wasn't really because I was a developer or an architect. So it was really because of my open source background. It helped me a lot. So I'm media engineering project manager. I was graduated from NG Media in France. I worked from 2008 to 2020 at Servbox in France. It was an amazingly good experience. My first one. It forged my skills. I thank them a lot for all what they taught me, all the projects we have done together. And after that, in 2012, I was back to Tunisia. I worked shortly in 2 companies. And in the second company, we have worked on an internationally awarded project. So all the team gathered 44 international awards. 2 of them are Grand Prix, and 7 of them are gold. So I'm not sure if you heard about mobilizing the 12-man application. So the idea was putting giant speakers in the stadiums. And you have a mobile and web application where you hit buttons and you hear the supporters or the drum sound on the stadium. And we had a client application at the stadium that was doing the mix and calculating the ratio between the sounds. So the idea was really amazing. It was an amazingly good experience. We have done this only once. Then the government decided to go back to football matches with supporters, but it was one of my best experiences, one of the most challenging and innovating social projects I have done in my career. So my background, so when I started my career in Servbox, I was immediately put in the open source world. So Servbox had, the Flex Foundry framework when Flex was alive, when it was used very much. They had the Maven Flex plugin. It was a well-known plugin, so I worked on that plugin. And after that, they have released a less-known ActionScript and Flex framework. It was named ActionScript Cafe. We used it in production, and that project we created was sold a few years later to some big French companies. So, and the idea was So it was a carpooling project that used that project, and the performances were good with ActionScript Cafe. And I have some contributions, some personal contributions. So I have Active Record, which is an active record implementation for ActionScript. Of course, I started this because ActionScript is no more being used, but I have done a lot of advanced features on that framework. I also have Starling MVC Wings. So Starling MVC Wings is, I don't know if you know Starling framework. So Starling framework is a Flex framework for stage 3D. So it loads textures. It loads 2D textures on 3D plans. And the idea was, when we were working on the 12-man project, so is to create a framework that we could use to develop the application very quickly. So we put an MVC and IOC stack on top of Starling. And Starling was loading and unloading and doing the actions in the application just using XML. So it was no more painful creating texture, loading them, unloading them, and managing the resources. And they also have a not known at all ActionScript library is Kalim, and Kalim is a regular expression engine for Arabic. So if you put a word in Arabic, it creates all the possible regular expressions for it to do the search for it. This is how I learned regular expressions, and I love them. So I love them when I worked on that project. So then, since 2013, things have changed for me. I'm still contributing to open source, but in 2013, I started sending contributions to Big Blue Button. Then in 2016, I think we created the PHP library, which is forked now, so for different choices. And I'm also doing some validation on the Big Blue Button front because of my background. So I'm not only a programmer, I'm also a designer, but I'm no more doing design. So, but I'm helping the Big Blue Button team fixing their fonts and making sure that they are compliant. I also have some contributions to Fork CMS. So Fork CMS is a CMS based on Symfony, developed in Belgium. Some other small contributions to OmniPay, Barclay, APDQ, and Readvice got the eLive PDF, the ActionScript. So we are now maintaining the eLive PDF ActionScript library. Of course, ActionScript is no more used, but when we got this project, so we immediately put the PDF export with annotations on the Flash client on Big Blue Button. So a bit of history of Big Blue Button to understand its background and some of other things that we are going to talk about later. So Big Blue Button started in 2007 as an internal project in Carleton University. It was written under the Technology Innovation Program there. So Carleton University is in Canada. And the issue they found so why they did write it? Because they found that a lot of open source software are being developed and maintained and having contributions from a lot of companies, and a lot of people are taking the decision. And there is one moment where few things don't go properly. So, as example, it happened for MySQL. It happened for MySQL and for some other projects. So in 2008, Blindside Networks, the company who is legally owning and now maintaining the BigBlue Button source code, was created. Also, the community was leveraged. We'll talk about it later. So having an open source project without a community doesn't make any sense. So this is why the community was leveraged there. In 2011, we were missing some steps, but we are just putting the big headlines. So in 2011, the recordings playback was released. So it's an important piece. We talk about it later in the contributions guidelines and how to think about the recordings. Yes, leveraging community is a bit copy-paste, and NComp started working on BigBlue Button. NComp is one of the companies that have the most contributing companies. And NComp also started as an internal university project in Brazil. Then it was transformed to a company. So they were providing a platform based on BigBlue Button. Then they went commercially with the NComp name. Then they transformed it to ELOS. So in 2012, the first developer summit was held. I think it was in Porto Alegre, not sure. So it wasn't in Canada, but developer summits are held 2 times per year. In the spring in Canada, and in the winter in December, somewhere between October and December in Porto Alegre in Brazil. So during those developer summits, we try to accelerate working on features. We design some new features, and then we give a feedback to the community. In 12-13, something amazing happened. The first HTML5 client was prototyped, and when I recall it, so it was completely different from what we see now. Really, really different. And the first accessibility certificate was given to BigBlue Button the same year with the release of version 0.81. And accessibility is one of the features that BigBlue Button really relies on for providing distance learning. Then in 2016, version 1.0 was released 8 years later. The last year, version 2.0 was released. It didn't sustain too much, and version 2.2 was released this year. So, what technologies are being used in BigBlue Button? So I got a lot of people asking me that question, really a lot. I'm being asked about what technologies are being used in BigBlue Button. So BigBlue Button is a mix of technologies. It's not using a single technology. I just put the big ones here, but if you go try understanding its architecture, you'll find that there is more than that. But mainly, BigBlue Button is JavaScript or Node.js, I would say, because you have more than that. So HTML, CSS. It's using Meteor for the HTML5 application, client and server. It's using a lot of JVM, Java, Scala, and Groovy for the backend. Ruby for the recording processing. a lot of shell scripts for the management, for the server management, C++ for FreeSwitch and the current media streaming server, and a small portion of Python hidden, I think it's hidden somewhere, I forgot where it is hidden. And if you want to contribute to Big Blue Button, I don't think really you need to understand that, so you just need to learn on the fly. If you don't know anything, you just try follow the code, learn it. Yes, you can't have everything. So I even myself done some contributions to the HTML5 client, and I'm still not very comfortable with Node.js, but on the other hand, with JVM, I'm doing it more comfortably. So you just have to learn on the fly. So many technologies are important. So what are the current versions of Big Blue Button? So officially, the version 2.2.22 was released the last week. It is the latest development version. The latest released development version is 2.3 Alpha 1, but there is more and more development going on the 2.3 version, really a lot. And what is challenging, if you are developing a feature, selecting which version you are going to put it. Will it be in 2.2 or 2.3? So it's not an easy to make decision because Big Blue Button never releases on dates. This is what the product manager always says. Yes, Fred says we're releasing quality, not on dates. And the issue releasing on dates, I absolutely understood him. Having a lot of people relying on Big Blue Button or on a stable version, you couldn't just say we are going to release on that date and you release on that date and you take the risk of having an unstable software. So people who are using Big Blue Button are enjoying using it. And then the new features are released when the core team decides that they are stable enough. So let's talk a bit about the community. The community that was leveraged initially was in Google Forums. There is 3 different forums: Big Blue Button users, Big Blue Button dev, and Big Blue Button setup. And they are self-explanatory, so I don't think I have to explain them. Each one of them has a specific topic. And there is also the Big Blue Button Spanish, which is used a lot by Camilo and Think and Moodle community. And there is, of course, the GitHub repository, its issues, its pull requests. There is a lot of things to learn there. Hello? Yes. So, and the documentation, the official documentation, anyone can contribute to it. Then Greenlight. So Greenlight is officially part of the Big Blue Button project. You know, it is just a lightweight front end for Big Blue Button. And if you are looking for, as example, for a feature, so you want to suggest something, looking how to update Big Blue Button or customize it, so you'll find a lot on the forums. So how many integrations is there for Big Blue Button? I'm just here putting the main ones, but there is fairly more than that. Almost all the all the known LMSs have their own integrations for Big Blue Button. So Canvas LMS, WordPress, Moodle, Schoology, Mattermost, which is not an LMS, Drupal, all have their own integrations for Big Blue Button. Drupal integration, I think I was talking to one of its contributors yesterday. They have updated it for the latest version of Big Blue Button, but I'm not sure it was released yet or not. And you might see a new API integration for Big Blue Button soon. There is a rewrite for it, so I can't say more about it. But you might see new LTI, new proper and clean LTI integration for Big Blue Button. So let's talk here about the commercial support providers and their impact on the project. So all those 5 official commercial support providers, Black Tie Networks is the owner of Big Blue Button. Distance Learning Solutions is one of the most known hosting providers for Big Blue Button. IMDT, mconf, and JAdvice are very long-term contributors to the project. And all of those companies are actively contributing to the project. Then any feature so any big feature that needs to be developed goes through all or some of other companies' approval, especially technical, because each one of those companies have some talent on some areas. So, of course, Black Tie Networks has the final word, which is normal. But there is some talent that needs, consulting for properly implementing features. So, as example, if Big Blue Button is implementing a new feature that is related to media streaming, especially video, so mconf is going to be consulted. If there is something related to document conversion, Readvice is going to be consulted because I worked a lot on that area. If there is something about recordings, same mconf. If it is something about Java, MDT. If it is something about SIP, audio, so distance learning solution is going to be consulted. If it is something about the architecture and changing the big blocks or the HTML5 client, then Black Tie Networks is going to have the final word. And all those companies are participating to the project. And of course, so all of us are earning money because of Big Blue Button. So most of the features you are now seeing on Big Blue Button were features that were asked by customers. So this is what I could say about the commercial support providers. Of course, there is a lot of other companies doing Big Blue Button on their side, offering it as a renamed or rebranded product, but they don't have long-term contributions and the final decision about what goes to open source and what does not. So they are doing their things on their side. Let's now move to the Big Blue Button roadmap. So first, I would like to thank Frederic Dixon, the product manager of Beagle button for sharing this. So the roadmap, of course, we say fall of 2020, but no date. So the roadmap is for the version 2.3. So the roadmap is for 2.3, and the goal is to improve usability and engagement for teachers. And you're now going to see a lot of new features. So of course, the main goal of Beagle button is to provide high quality online learning experience for everyone. Beagle button focuses a lot on learning, not on conferences, not on webinars, but really, even if it is used by some other industries, but online learning stays the first, stays at the topmost priorities, or the head of the goals of Beagle button. So for usability, the idea is to make the user experience more better for the instructor, and giving more engagement for the students. We'll see what was implemented and what is going to be implemented in version 2.3. One of the new features that is now being currently tested in 2.3 is left and right placement of webcams. So the idea is to move the webcams at the right side or at the left side of the presentation. So currently webcams stays above, they stay above the presentation, but this is going to change in 2.3. So you can move webcams at the right or at the left. So for me, it's really useful because Arabic is my mother tongue, and moving things from right to left for me is more natural. So having as example now the user interface after working 1 year on Saudi project, on Saudi project, so I had the chat on the right. So I don't feel comfortable having the chat on the left. It's strange, but this is how I think. So when you maximize, when you close the chat area, you'll be able to see the webcams beside of the presentation at the left or at the right, and you can also move it. Something else that was requested a lot by teachers, I have some customers still complaining about it. Why the presentation is blocking the user interface? Why uploading the presentation is uploading the interface? So this is what we currently have. You now have the big white window when uploading the presentations, and you have to wait it to finish to start doing your presentation. In 2.3, it's going to change. So this feature is currently under heavy development. You will see your presentations being uploaded and converted while you are using normally your whiteboard. So you won't be disrupted by that big white window. Yes, thank you. Yeah, so thank you, Tyler, so Tyler is the user experience expert who is doing those improvements, and the HTML5 team is doing great work. So I think if you go to demo.guideline.org, you will see some part of this already implemented. Sorry, not demo. Demo is still using 2.2. And something new, so for switching presentation, you just use your plus button to quickly switch your presentation. That big window does no more open if you want to switch it, just 2 clicks and you switch your presentation. We also see something new about the network quality indicator. So the network quality indicator is disabled by default. It's not enabled. You have to enable it in the HTML5 client. And if you enable it, now you see here on the top bar a message showing your network quality if it falls back to medium or bad. So what is going to change in 2.3? So you'll see, so teachers or moderators will be able to see the network quality of all the other participants. So the idea is to have a feedback, is to give the moderator a real feedback of the participants network quality. As example, if all the people or the participants have a bad network quality, it will likely be a bad server choice. If only one or two of them have bad network quality, it means the issue is on their side, not on the BBB server. But we rarely see bad choices on the BBB servers, and we always suggest using bare metal servers, while virtualization has become very popular those days, and it is reliable enough if you know what provider to select. There is also another hidden feature in BBB named Smart Poll. So Smart Poll, I don't think it is documented enough, and it's one of the documentation areas that we need to explain or to enrich in the documentation. Currently, if you upload, so I'm sure you know polls, but you don't know, not sure if you already have seen smart polls. Smart polls, so smart polls are being generated from presentations. So as you see here, if you upload a presentation with a question, then 4 choices. In the backend, it will detect that this slide has a poll inside it. And what will happen, it will immediately create a poll for it. So you don't have to go through create poll button. You don't have to go through that create poll button to do it. And yes, so this is one of the things I'll probably take care of and write the documentation about it because it's very useful. So not sure, I think there is a smart portion of it, but not enough details. But it's really useful. So a teacher creates slides, have a slide of, let's say, 20, presentation of 20 slides, have 4 questions inside them. He just puts slides for smart polls and never uses the create poll button. So currently, the smart board appears here in the toolbar, and what is going to change? So this is smart board with choices. Yes. Yes. So what is new is that you can put choices here in the smart boards, but I have to ask more about it because I don't see what's new there. But probably it's the smart poll buttons that are going to move here instead of having the polling area appearing. So this is what's going to change. Something else important in 2.3, Google Button is going to put the poll results in chat. Why that? So what was challenging was putting the poll results in the recordings. And the easiest idea is just put them in the chat and you just have them in the recording playback. That's the easiest answer to that question. Improving the right hand notification. Oh yes, so I tested it on 2.3. It works amazingly good. If you go, not sure if it is an alpha, but it is in the after version. It works. So only the emoji of right hand. So of course you will be able to activate and deactivate the notifications. And I think there is a missing slide here. Yes. So there is a missing slide. So what will happen? You'll see a window showing the list of people that raised their hands. So I just took a wrong screenshot of the slide, but yes. So you'll see a window appearing in the top right area. A big one showing Razi, Mero, Marcus raised their hands. So there is some other features, but they'll be implemented after the release of 2.3. 3 of them. So the per user whiteboard. Currently, you can activate the multi-user whiteboard, but you can select who is drawing on the whiteboard and who is not. After the 2.3 release, one of the versions that is in the roadmap is giving individual access to the whiteboard. So I could have only one of 2 students sharing and drawing on the whiteboard with myself, the instructor. And you'll see the number of people currently having access to the whiteboard. Then you'll be able to remove the permissions for them. Type the responses to polling questions. The idea is to give more flexibility to poll answers. So you just give the students a fixed choices. So you can leave them. You can leave them the choice or to type their own answer. So you just ask a question, and they answer it. And of course, you will also be able to edit your own answers, so you can have custom answers for the polls. So when the user is asked to with the custom poll answer, when user is prompted to answer the poll, he gets this window and he will be able to type his answer. And the latest feature on the roadmap of 2.3 is randomly selecting, choosing a user. And teachers need that to see if the student is focusing enough on the course, or he's not away, or want to test one of his students for question, or give a quick exam for his student. Of course, and when a student is randomly selected, we'll see this window, and you'll see a brief animation of names before it goes away. So let's back here, and if you go to the GitHub repository, you'll see that there is more than that, but this is what officially I can share. There is a lot of other things being developed for Bigglebutton internally that are going to be released with 2.3. This is the main features that will be implemented for 2.3, but there is definitely more and more than we have presented there. So let's move now to the development. We'll talk here about how to set up a proper development environment for Bigglebutton, and more about how Readvice is doing it. You'll find in the documentation that you need to fork the repository, you need a virtual machine or a server, and so on. But here we'll present the tools that we are using to make things easier. Of course, for development, sometimes you are using a local vagrant machine. Some other companies have are using Docker containers. It's their homemade Docker containers. Sometimes we use a bare metal server or a virtual machine on the cloud. Of course, you need to know to do a lot of shell. Shell is your friend when you are developing Bigglebutton. Eclipse, because myself, I'm doing a lot of Java on Bigglebutton, and mutagen is a central piece in the development because it synchronizes your code to your remote location without any effort. So it watches your files and it syncs them to your remote machine, and you just do mutagen, I think, init sync or sync init. I forgot the command. And you put the source and the target, and of course you configure your ignore files. It understands them well, and it just syncs your code. And don't forget to put your compiled code in the ignore, else it will be synced. So you'll have a lot of traffic and a lot of conflicts. But mutagen, I think we are using it since 3 years for development. I just try it on my local machine. The code goes immediately to the remote machine, which is locally vagrant provisioned or an instance in the cloud. Then I just compile like it was on my own machine, and I'm using Windows 10, so it avoids me having Ubuntu distribution along with my Windows. So here things are going more interesting. if you are going to contribute to Big Blue Button, so there is a lot of things that you need to know. So first, thank you again for this meeting. So this slide is very important, and a part of this slide will be in the official documentation, because I spotted some areas that could be improved. Some of them are not yet on the documentation, and it's just the way we are using to Big Blue Button. We are doing it since so many years, and we never thought about expressing it properly. So it helps us seeing things more clearly now. The first thing you need is, if you want to contribute to the open source part of Big Blue Button, you need to sign the contributor agreement. If you don't sign it, your code will never be merged. So Blind Sign Network is doing that for legal reasons and to avoid any legal issues with the code ownership. The contributor agreement needs to be signed by yourself if you are doing contribution yourself, or by your legal entity you are working for, so which is your company, institution, organization, foundation, whatever. The next thing you need to know when you are contributing to Big Blue Button is understanding the its high-level architecture. And why it is important? Because Big Blue Button is a real-time application, and what you need to really to understand, if you are going to add a feature that has a feedback interaction in the HTML5 client, you need to understand how that message goes from the HTML5 client, then goes through all the pipeline of the real-time stack, then goes back to the other HTML5 client. So you need to understand. I'm going to express it properly here. So you need to understand how the HTML5 client sends the message to MongoDB, then MongoDB sends the message to Redis, then how the message is stored in JSON format, then how Apps deserializes that message from JSON to a JVM or Scala object, then how it distributes it to any other application if needed, it sends it to BBB Web or the FreeSwitch events service layer. What it does with that message, so does it record it or not? Then how it transforms it so it gets a command and sends a message, and how after processing that command, it processes it to a message, serializes it again to JSON format, sends it to Redis. MongoDB listens to Redis. Then the HTML5 client reads it from Mongo, and all of this happens, let's say, in pseudo real time. It's not real time technically, but this is what you need to understand. And if you are going to touch the code, you'll see that your message is going through a lot of applications before getting back in another new format to the client. Something important also, you need to know the area you are working on. If you are working, as example, on the presentation, you need to follow your message or your command or your feature through all the stack, and you need to find the areas where it is where there is an interaction on that feature. The next thing to take care about is make sure that your feature is configured. So it can be enabled, disabled. You can change their values. So because not of the features of Big Blue Button makes sense to be on the open source, and they don't have all the same level of interest from a product management overview. So some features, as example, are disabled by default, or some features have a low threshold by default, just because they don't have a high level of interest on the open source side. If you are working on the HTML5 client, you need to be sure that what you have implemented is accessible. Why? Because at every big release, Big Blue Button is officially getting an accessibility certificate. And you know, universities, there is some people that need accessible applications to study, to follow the courses, to listen, to properly understand the user interface. So I'll give you a little example. The colors you are seeing now on Big Blue Button, those differences, the different shades of blue, went through the accessibility validation. They were not chosen just because they were beautiful, but they were chosen, of course, because they are accessible. So, as example, a colorblind person would easily see the difference between the colors, and this is what we are trying to explain to customers when they are coming to us and say, "Hey, can you change the colors of Big Blue Button?" We tell them, if you change the colors, you are losing an important feature for Big Blue Button, which is accessibility. And students that have any problem in their life and need accessibility, you will be unfair with them, and will make things harder for them. Of course, accessibility, it's more than the tab, so it's the naming the actions, the buttons, the areas, using the tabs, the colors, the shapes, all of that. And you can easily find accessibility guides from experts in the internet. Another thing to think about, or to take really into consideration when you are implementing a new Big Blue Button feature, or you're trying to contribute. If you recall, we talked about putting the poll chat results in the chat. And one of the main issues we had that made the Big Blue Button team take this decision is recordings. So is your feature eligible to recordings or not? And if it is eligible to recording, do you need to put it in the current recording format, or do you need to create a new recording format? And if you need to create a recording format, what that recording format would be, how it will behave? Will it have a playback? Will it just be how it will go to how it will behave for the integrations? You also need to think about the integrations. So if you are going to generate a new type of recording, you need to create a metadata XML, and you need to make sure that if you are using an integration, it is properly understood by it. Think also about recordings, putting the meeting ID, the user ID, and why this is the easiest response, or the easiest answer to that is we use logs very much for debugging BBB button. For debugging it in production, sorry. And because in production you can't just stop a meeting and say, hey, I'm going to stop 1,000 or 2,000 students from having their courses just to update a server or to fix a bug or to deploy an update. So you need to have the logs with meeting IDs, user IDs, actions. If you are working on the HTML5 client, the browser type, the version, all those type of things. And with those logs, we were able to find a lot of things, fixed a lot of issues, improved the stability of product. Same thing for production. Why you need to make your feature ready for production? So sometimes you add a new project to BBB, or sometimes you change how it is being built, or sometimes you change the permissions, or we had a lot of cases. Sometimes you're just adding a binary that will be used by the JVMs. Make sure that your new code has the guidelines for putting things in production. Then the core team will take care of it and put what you have done on the official packages. And of course, whatever you do, test it well yourself, your team, ask the community to test it, put it on a server. The BBB button community will be able to test it, and especially the core developers will always be glad to test any new feature and comment it. So there is a small difference between contributing on features that are on roadmap and others that are not. So what you need to know is that features on roadmap, most of them, not all of them, have already people or core team developers assigned to it. And you will be able to find those on GitHub issues and pull requests. So what you need to know is that you need to read the forums, the background behind that feature, why people were asking for it. Check the issues and the pull requests that are related to that feature. And of course, if you signed the contributor agreement and understood well how to do a BBB button development, you could ask for an assignment for small tasks, but most of them have already core team developers assigned on the features you are seeing a roadmap. However, any contribution is always welcome. Any improvement, any idea, any suggestion is always welcome. So let's talk now about features that are not on roadmap and how you can get them on the open source product. First, you need to make sure that your feature is adding a real value to the open source product. Why the open source product? Because some companies have versions of BBB button built on it, and of course, what I explained before, they are earning money of it, so it makes no sense putting that feature on the open source. And what will happen is that you'll be harming that company, and so there will be no more earning money, and you'll put them in risk. So to make sure that your feature have really adds a real value to the open source, you need to select a version. So when there is multiple versions, as example, now we have 2.2 and 2.3 development going in parallel. you need to write a design and architecture document, or if you have a user experience or user interface designer who is really experienced, you can suggest something. Never try to copy the competition, not because Skype, Teams, Zoom, all the others have that feature. You need the same one. It's not how product management goes. So don't try to copy the competition. Big Blue Button has its own philosophy. It works on. It has its own technical stack. It has its own logic. Just don't try to copy the competition. It won't add any value. So you can add a feature, but not the same way the competition is doing it, because Big Blue Button is always trying to make the difference from the competition. And once you are sure you follow those steps, you need to contact the core team for validation. You need to go through product management validation. You need to go through research and development team validation and make sure your solution is does technically match the Big Blue Button vision and its stack. And of course, the user interface and user experience validation is something you can't go without. Tyler will always be here to help and give suggestions for UX improvement. So he is the expert on that area. So once you have done all of that and made sure that you went through the core team validation, open source, or went through any consulting company through the commercial support providers, then you can safely start developing your feature, because now you know that is going to the open source, and you'll get the core team review your code, give you piece of advice, get your code merged if you are merged, and merged, yes, in small pull requests or in big pull requests. You get the team testing it. I also added some things that were not asked during this talk, but I think they are really very, very important from DevOps and from people that working a lot on production Big Blue Button. What we always do in advice: secure our servers. The minimum for us is having Fatoban, AppArmor, and Wazoo. There is no way to have a server go online for any customer without having this in place. So we can use shell scripts, Ansible, and we are using both of them to do that. You can use any other server provisioning solutions to do that. But this is what the minimum we are doing right now, and we are thinking about adding more security to our servers. You know, when you get a server VPS, it's clean. You can do whatever you want, whatever hackers are happy with, and you can go with a clean Big Blue Button server on it. You can make a Big Blue Button instance on just a clean server. So for production, we are seeing. Also for production, you need to put monitoring and alerting. There is a lot of solutions, too many, so all of them works. What is really useful is using the Mongo collections to get those statistics and those data. It is the fastest way to get those statistics about the meeting users, the webcams, the audio channels, and so on. Internally, in re-advice, we are using Zabbix for the monitoring and Zulip for the alerting. So Zabbix is just sending webhooks to Zulip. Zulip is just an open source Slack competitor. And we get all our notifications for our servers directly on the monitoring stream on the lib. Of course, you can use NetData alone. You can use Grafana plus Prometheus. There is some companies that are doing this. You can use ELK. There is no issue with that. There is, of course, CheckMK is your friend in Germany, and there is a lot of companies. I discovered it recently in Germany that are using CheckMK for monitoring the glue button. Don't forget to create a shell script for redundant tasks, restarting the video stack, restarting the servers, doing a backup for your recordings, doing a backup for your logs, extending your recordings retention, updating your configuration after updating your servers to a newer version. So you need to take care of all of this. And of course, don't forget to have a co-turn server. Some universities have strong firewalls, some companies have very strict firewalls. So you need to tunnel your audio through co-turn server to make sure that all your users can connect to audio. And here finally, there is some features that early advice would be happy to see on the glue button. I gathered this from our experience on the project, not on the community, recommendations, so not all of them. But what would be really nice to have, so I'm saying these words, sorry, a bit late for this hackathon, but yes, better recording management. Now we have only BBB record, the shell script for managing the recordings. It works well, but it needs more feedback. So you can do research, you can check for errors. You don't have, sometimes you don't see the recordings that didn't process properly. You can find why. You need to check in the logs. So probably thinking about improving the recordings management might be a good idea. So another feature that is still wanted by the community, it was present in the Flash client. We designed it internally, but COVID prevented us from implementing it, is exporting the whiteboard with its annotations, or the current slide with its annotations. So it would be really nice to see a feature. Of course, if anyone is going to contribute on the open source side, just don't forget to go through the guideline of contributing for features that are not planned on the roadmap. Why? Because till now no one has that feature assigned. So I had it myself, but I had to move some other things to improve stability, fix bugs when I wanted to start this. Something what we really want to do is move to JVM 8 to JVM 11. It's challenging. There is some incompatibilities that we need to check, but it's worth doing it. Having the translations reviewed by professional translators, that's something we need. Yes, so I've done the Arabic translation. I speak easily 3 languages, but I am not a translation expert. Sometimes I lose the context. I say things like I know, but I'm not a translation expert. And having more translation reviewers on Transifex would really help the product. Another thing that I'm suggesting since a while is transitioning the HTML5 application to PM2. And you know, if you are a Node.js developer, you know that PM2 can create a cluster of your Node.js applications and distribute them across all your CPU cores. And the advice is really interested to see that happening instead of creating individual instances of each of the HTML5 clients just using Bash. So using PM2, having cluster, having a failed application restarting with PM2, this is something that needs to be digged up, and I'm sure that will improve the experience, and you could have more users on the same meeting in the client. From the developer side of view, so yes, having code auto formatting configuration for all the projects would be really helpful. Why that? Because sometimes you'll find it funny, but just core developers are commenting. Yes, we are commenting ourselves just for spaces and tabs, and having the same rules that all one could follow would really be beneficial for all of us. So thank you very much for following this presentation. Sorry for being so long. Yes, 1 hour and 15 minutes. All your questions are welcome, whatever the question is. So I would be really happy to answer them.
So yeah, thank you very much, Ghazi, for the introduction into the development process and all the background information on Big Blue Button. And before we start with the question and answering session, just a question: shall we record the Q&A session as well, or shall we pause the recording? How do you think about that?
So if you think that the community could benefit of the Q&A session, yes, please keep it recorded.
All right. Yeah, then let's keep it recorded.
Thank you.
All right. I would try to moderate the Q&A session a little bit. So first of all, let's see, do you guys have any certain questions regarding the development process, the administration, etc.? Can you raise a hand? So there's one in this room.
But
and yeah, maybe let's
Miro has probably also some.
Miro probably also has some questions. So well, let's just quickly start off with Enno.
Okay, all right. Yeah, thank you first of all, Ghazi, for this presentation. I was really amazed by how long Big Blue Button is already existing. I didn't know about that, to be honest. And yeah, first question: when is 2.3 being released?
You know, some questions in life don't have any answer. So yes, so the goal is to have it released for fall 2020.
Okay.
But the date is never given, because the core development team really focuses on stability, and we can't release. So Big Blue Button can't be released if it is not stable enough. So sometimes we internally decided that the next version would be released in 6 months, and we have seen it released after 1 year, just for stability issues. Mm-hmm. So handling recordings, making sure that accessibility is well implemented, we have enough logs, upgrade in production for the older version goes seamless. All of that needs to be tested. This is why sometimes it takes more time seeing a new version seeing the light.
Okay, I just saw fall 2020, and I thought maybe I'll give it a try to ask to get some more insights. But thank you so much for this answer. And my second question is, regarding designs and styles and components. We're currently working with Figma, and we've been like importing everything into a Figma file. Is there any possibility to update the design, and who's responsible for that? Because we saw for our designs that we are currently trying to develop, we had some more slight changes and saw that some of the colors of Big Blue Button that Big Blue Button is using were actually not in the design manual. So who should we address with those questions?
Yes, so if you're, thank you for that question. If your design issues are really important for the open source side, yes. So you need to contact Blind Star Network, who is taking care of that, or just create an issue on GitHub and explain why that design doesn't go well. So you'll have Tyler answering to that. And if you are going to redesign something, so it will probably go through a consulting company, through one of the commercial support providers, and it will be reviewed professionally. So, but if you think that something really has to change on the open source side, create a GitHub issue, assign it to Tyler, to Frederick Dixon, who is a product management, Tyler is the UX expert, and you will get a clear answer. So Tyler has answer for everything in the user interface. So he will tell you why we can't put a button here, why we are putting an area here, why we are using this font, why this color. He will answer you, surely.
Thank you. And I have a third question that is quite practical, or on an organizational part. This contributor agreement, how can we find that? Is it easy to access? Because I just couldn't find it in my research.
Yeah. So the contributor agreement link is available on the docs, and you'll find it. You'll find it on the area talking, on the page talking about the contributing to the project.
Okay.
So you'll find the link for a PDF file. You find the link for the PDF file to sign, and after that you need to send it to Frederick Dixon for approval.
Okay, thank you. That's it from my side.
Okay, so any other questions? Miro.
Yes, first of all, thank you very much for presentation and for all of your good recommendation how to drive a server safely. And this is one of my questions about logs and monitoring versus general data protection regulations. So I'm observing a lot of different log files due to the variety of modules. Is this a general design goal to split technical logs from logs containing data about personal use, user IDs, and so on? Any idea how to move forward with this one?
Thank you for the question, Miro, and thank you for your comment. So there is currently, I think, an open source repository talking about GPDR compliancy for Big Blue Button. Some of it have already been implemented and fixed in Big Blue Button. Some others have not been yet. And I think some of the commercial support providers have a full GPDR compliancy on their hosting, but you need to get in touch with them to understand what they have done and what you need to do. So, and for now, if you go to the logs, so what you can do is just, as example, you can send logs to your central logging like Logstash and pre-process your logs to hide personal data. So you can use that just by doing some regular expressions. So this, I hope it answers your question as well.
Thanks. A second general question is about the long-term stability of several modules. So you recommended to have a co-turn server, for instance. My question is, will this code stay for longer, or are some modules up to a change because of the particular limitations? Currento was in discussion. Co-turn also has some trouble. So what about the general high-level architecture of Big Blue Button and its modules? Is it stable, mature?
Okay, so the high-level architecture of Big Blue Button changed so many times. It's changing. Why? Because there is some technical challenges that couldn't be achieved without doing so. As example, moving the JVM or the JVM applications to Scala, and more specifically to Akka framework, helped us a lot, really a lot. So we were processing real-time data streams very fast and very safely. We're controlling the memory, and Akka is still doing a great job. So I've never seen any Akka application crashing yet. So it's very stable. And what we make sure, so even if sometimes myself I do some big refactorings on the components, so we always make sure that if you upgrade your server, it is seamless. So you upgrade safely. Or we will tell you clearly in documentation there is a big difference between version 1 and version 2. So you need to just back up your recordings. They are compatible with the new version, and reinstall it from scratch. So you always get that advice in the documentation and on the release notes. But yes, so components are changing, and you know WebRTC is going toward differentiation now. So we are still discussing this internally, how we are going to handle this. Yes, so you know, browsers are forcing Big Blue Button to use some technologies and to avoid some others. There is some choices that are logical for Big Blue Button, and some others that are validated by the core team developers before doing anything. So it needs to go through an approval before going to the code. And what you will see if you are really contributing for long term is that you'll be able to follow those updates easily. And the best way to understand them is always asking questions. How did you do it? Why did you take this decision? And what improvements did it add to the product? So you'll find some of the projects there is the labs directories. Some of them were out from the labs directory and really went to the production. Some others are still in. Some others are being developed in the background just for research and development and see how it improves the product. So this is how some of what is happening behind the curtains for Big Blue Button.
A third general question is about guideline for changes of the APIs. So if someone is finding that the API should be extended or modified, are there general rules how to put this on validation?
Okay, so this question makes me smile because the API question comes on all our developer summits. Oh yes. The issue behind, so if someone is going to develop a new API for BigBlueButton, it is possible. Of course, it is not in the roadmap, so you need to go through all the validation process and make sure it is going to be accepted in the final open source product. But more important than that, you need to make your new API. Compatible with the previous version. Why? Because of the integration. So there is millions of people using BigBlueButton now with Moodle, Canvas, LMS, Camilo, WordPress, and having an API that breaks is very problematic, really very problematic. So I think we put this question. We put it in 10 summits for 5 years, but we never, I even personally started a new API project, a prototype, but we never went further just because it makes so much trouble supporting all the existing integrations without breaking things. So a new API means supporting all the API exactly as it is, whatever the language, the new language or the new conventions are using. So will it be a RESTful API or anything else? It will include IoT or whatever you want. It needs to be compatible and work without any issues with the previous, with the current version of BigBlueButton.
Okay, thank you. That was so far from my side. In the recorded session, I have some minor suggestions, but this is not so interesting for the whole community, I guess. So.
Oh yes, please. We are
ready.
looking for your contributions and piece of advice. Oh yes.
All right. So I will take a look at the room. Is there someone else online who has a question to Ghazi? Doesn't seem like that. I will have a look at the physical room. Do you guys have any questions? Not that you're raising your hand, but no. No. Okay. Okay. Then maybe I can just give you just a small insight into the topics that we are currently working on during the hackathon, because we already started 2 days ago. And we have created 5 teams looking at different topics. And one of the topics we were looking at is simultaneous translation. Because we are looking to use BigBlueButton within a conference environment, an international conference environment where multiple languages are spoken. And so Enno and I have taken a look at how those simultaneous interpreter booths or those cabins usually look like. They have like a piece of hardware where they push some buttons and say, I want to hear that audio input, I want to speak that language, and I want to like loop through the signal from the stage to another output, etc. So that's one point we're working on. The other team is looking at the topic of streaming, because we have experienced that there are many conference calls that we would like to share with the world, like with many viewers. And the question is how to let's say, stream the video conference via a streaming service. And the approach that is currently used is by basically creating a virtual browser that is joining a session as a participant and then kind of capturing the screen. And the screen is then streamed to an, what's it called, RTMP server or something like that. So that's the second thing we're working on. The third thing we're working on is actually being able to download recorded sessions. So downloading an MP4 file of a session. And we also stumbled upon the one topic that you've spoken about. It's the captions in the presentation, because during the recording, like all those events where someone puts a pointer on the presentation or draws a line or writes a text, all that information is kind of stored in an SVG format. And we're currently looking at a possibility to transfer those SVG information that are like the annotations into PNGs that are then overlaid on the presentation slides. So that's the thing we're currently looking on. And we also have two other topics that I always forget. So I will ask the round again. What were the other two topics?
2.3.
Yeah. The one is we wanted to test the current development, the alpha version, the 2.3, where, by the way, we couldn't connect using Greenlight. So there was kind of a bug with Greenlight that could not start a Big Blue Button session there. But it's possible using the API.
And the second thing is audio and screen sharing.
Exactly. Yeah. Audio and screen sharing, that's one of the most important parts. Where we've already made some good progress. So it is possible to play, let's say, a video on a client, and then the audio stream as well as the video of that participant or presenter is then streamed to the server. And as I got it, the audio quality right now when it's streamed is not very high. But I'm not too deep into the topic, but it's like just to give you a brief overview of what we're currently doing. And there's a question.
How do I put something like audio and screen sharings on the roadmap? Because it seems much easier to go the way to put it on the roadmap and then just merge it than to merge something that's not on the roadmap. Or how do I suggest to put it on the roadmap? Maybe it's better.
Yeah. So that's maybe.
Yes. So the sound was a bit far. Could you just get closer and ask your question, please?
Sorry.
Yes. So the sound was far. So could he just get closer to?
Sorry.
Yes, and ask his question.
Sorry. The thing is, we have we programmed a little prototype to have audio screen sharing with a rather simple solution on the HTML5 client. Basically, what we're doing now is taking the other audio stream that's coming from the system sound, merge it with the sound of the microphone or with the stream of the microphone, and just send it with a free switch. Has some drawbacks, I must admit, but it works and it's kind of easy to program, and that was my main goal, just to have it done easily. The question is, is there a way to suggest to put this on the roadmap? Because it seems much easier to ask you guys to put it on the roadmap and then have basically some support of the core development team than to go there and have a ticket or feature that's not on the roadmap and try to bring it into the code.
Yes, thank you for that question. So the easiest way is really, as explained before, if you want something to go to roadmap, it needs to go through the core team validation process. You need to make it configurable, so it should be enabled. It should be possible to enable and disable that feature, because you can force people using that feature. So you need it. You always enable it on your servers, But yes, so this is how you should think. And I think you're just sending the YouTube or any video audio stream for that video through FreeSwitch just to make sure that is recorded. Yes, but did you think about yes? So did you think if all the other users need to hear the same audio or not? So normally they should not, because they could hear the audio of that video directly on their computer. So this is some consideration take. But yes, putting something on the roadmap, just sign the contributor agreement, go through the validation, create a GitHub issue, explain what you are going to do, explain how you are going to design it, how you are going to handle it in the recordings, how it will be configurable, what are the configuration entries for it. And normally it should be okay. Yes, there is no issue with that. Just make sure it is configurable.
Well, we use the configuration, it's already there. There's already a configuration in the settings.yaml.
Yes, so there is a lot of configuration. So there is a configuration in BBB Web. There is a configuration in settings.yaml. There is a configuration in the recordings, playback. There is the configuration in the shell scripts for the daily cron. So there is a lot of configuration entries, and all of them have their own purpose. Okay. So sometimes if the feature is meeting targeted, so it's probably better doing it in the BB Web, in Big Blue Button properties. If it is just user targeted, then it goes to settings.yaml.
Okay. I will read through the guidelines there. Thank you very much.
All right. So, if I could add a little to the question that Dennis just asked. So, is there kind of a way to, let's say, put a point on our wish list, like features that we would like to see, and just hope that someone of the core development team picks up and tells, oh, that may be a good feature. So is it also like the way to propose a ticket and use a very detailed information about the things that we would like to see?
Yes, so just open a GitHub issue for it and mark it as a new feature. You explain how it should work, and of course, if it adds a real value to the open source, the open source side, it would really be taken one day, or just get one of the core development team assigned to it. So who really knows the product, the customer needs, what the market needs is the product manager, and the validation goes first through him.
All right. Okay, so now that I told you a little bit about the topics that we are currently on, do you have some suggestions or maybe some points where you think we should look at certain projects that are currently running, or like people that we should speak to definitely when thinking of the 5 issues that the 5 topics that we're working on? Like translations.
Yes, so most of the 5 issues you are working on, I think there is open tickets for them. Some of them are old, like the MP4 recordings, and yes, so most of those features have a commercial value. So it's hard to say that if they are going to be accepted on the open source or not. So yes, most features you are working on have a commercial value. However, the multi-audio channel as I already informed you, is probably going to be its development is going to be done in the open source by the core team too. So at a certain moment, so we need to interact and choose the right way to merge the code or select which version to keep.
All right.
Yes. Hi, Mero. Mero is doing his hand.
I have an add-on question on this part. During the COVID crisis, during the last month, did you observe a new kind of use cases coming up, which might be minor demands in the past, but now raising and getting more impact on the open source community, perhaps?
So, generally speaking, what has been observed during COVID-19 is, as you probably heard about, is WebRTC differentiation. A lot of people who started or were back to using video conferencing and audio conferencing. The big companies, and the organization Mozilla, Google, Microsoft put a lot of efforts on WebRTC streaming, and now we are talking about differentiation codecs and so on. So this is in general at the general level. At a smaller level for Big Blue Button, so all the commercial support providers were highly solicited. So we are saying it, so we are running out of resources to respond all the demand. We have seen the numbers of servers highly increasing. So the companies that had 10 or 20 or 100 servers went to 200, 500. Some others went to 2,000. When just counting we're just counting the servers that we own, not the ones we are managing. We have seen new features requested. There are some very big projects that have been commercial, that have been leveraged, and that are using Big Blue Button that were financed by venture capital institutions, especially in India. Germany has an amazing number of Big Blue Button clusters, thousands of servers. The German states, I was just surprised by that number. I wouldn't tell which was. There is a lot of states now using Big Blue Button. It's Big Blue Button became part of their daily life. And in the Middle East, they're more hesitant to use it just because they're still stick to Microsoft. Microsoft has a big impact on the Middle East, a very big impact. So in the 90s and the start of the 2000 years, so Microsoft invested a lot in the Middle East for the .NET technologies, their technologies. So they are still a lot with Microsoft and trusting Microsoft a lot. Then, yes, so this is really what I can recall right now. I hope I answered to your question, Mero.
Yeah, that's probably also a big impact on the validation process of the core team. So I understand that you have to carefully select features going into the next release due to lack of resources to put more than that into.
Yes, there is two things. So there is features that have an impact or an added value on the open source project, and there is features that have an added value on the commercial for the commercial companies. So you can't really have to make sure that the project can live. So its model So the project needs to be financed by those companies, and those companies need to be financed for Big Blue Button to live. So some of the features you are seeing GitHub will probably not go commercial because companies are earning money from them. And this is their efforts, this is how they are paying their employees, this is how they are contributing, putting more contribution to the project. So it's really a balance to find, and the product management of Big Blue Button is the one who has the final word on which goes to open source, which stays on the commercial side, just because people are just eating bread from it. And if you remember, we just talked about in the history of Big Blue Button about the issue that was found by the team section of Carleton University. So if you can't build an open source project without a proper business ecosystem, and if you are also having a lot of companies sharing the decision of that for that open source project, so things will probably go wrong for you.
Okay, thank you very much. I do very appreciate your
Thank you, Mary.
advice. Thank you.
All right, let's have a look at the room. Are there still some open questions, guys?
Nope.
Anyone?
Thank you.
I'll look at the chat. Is there something in the chat? No, I guess no. There's no additional question in the chat. So I would say thank you very much for your time and for your expertise. I will just quickly go ahead and stop the recording of the meeting, and then we can have a little chat afterwards. Yep.
Thank you guys for hosting this hackathon.